The emergency board meeting at Meridian Technologies began at 7 a.m. on November 12, 2024, with CEO Jonathan Blake's empty chair casting a shadow over the mahogany conference table. 24 hours earlier, Blake had been found dead in his penthouse office, a single gunshot wound to the chest. What the board members didn't know was that their CEO's death was connected to a web of corporate espionage, blackmail, and murder that would destroy the company they had spent decades building. The killer had walked into Blake's office at 9:47 p.m. on November 11th, using a keycard that should have been impossible to obtain. Security cameras captured a figure in a dark coat approaching Blake's desk, but the cameras mysteriously malfunctioned for exactly 17 minutes, long enough for someone to commit murder and escape undetected. The timing was no accident. Hidden in Blake's private safe, investigators would find $2.3 million in cash, compromising photographs of board members, and a detailed plan to eliminate anyone who threatened to expose his affair with the company's head of cybersecurity, Victoria Chun. What Blake thought was a plan to protect his mistress had actually made him the target of a sophisticated corporate assassination. The murder weapon belonged to Blake himself, purchased 3 months earlier when he first received anonymous threats about his relationship with Chun. The killer had turned Blake's own protection against him, using inside knowledge of his habits, his fears, and his desperate attempts to keep his affair secret from his wife and the corporate board. Victoria Chun would be found dead in her apartment the following morning, an apparent suicide that investigators would later prove was the second murder in a carefully orchestrated plan to destroy Meridian Technologies from within. The real killer had been planning this corporate massacre for over a year, positioning themselves perfectly to profit from the chaos that would follow. Meridian Technologies occupied 43 floors of the downtown Seattle skyline, its glass facade reflecting the ambition and success of the tech giant that had revolutionized cybersecurity software. The company employed over 8,000 people worldwide and generated annual revenues exceeding $2.8 billion under the leadership of CEO Jonathan Blake. Blake, 54, had built Meridian from a small startup into an industry leader over 18 years. He lived with his wife Margaret and their twin daughters in a $4.2 million estate in Bellevue, maintaining the image of a devoted family man while secretly conducting a passionate affair with one of his most trusted executives. Victoria Chun, 36, served as Meridian's chief information security officer and had been instrumental in developing the company's flagship encryption software. She had joined Meridian 5 years earlier after a distinguished career at the NSA, bringing government-level security expertise to the private sector. Her relationship with Blake had begun 18 months earlier, during late-night strategy sessions. The affair had remained hidden from Blake's wife and the corporate board, but several employees had noticed the increased private meetings and Blake's unusual interest in cybersecurity projects that fell under Chun's supervision. The relationship had created vulnerabilities in the company's executive structure that would ultimately prove fatal. Meridian's headquarters featured state-of-the-art security systems, biometric access controls, and surveillance cameras throughout the building. Blake's penthouse office occupied the entire 43rd floor, accessible only by executive elevator and protected by multiple layers of electronic security. The building was considered impenetrable to outside threats. Jonathan Blake arrived at his office at 8:15 p.m. on November 11th, 2024, using his private elevator to bypass the main security checkpoints. He had received an encrypted message earlier that day requesting an urgent meeting about a potential security breach involving Victoria Chun's access to classified government contracts. The message appeared to come from the company's head of internal security. Blake disabled his office security cameras at 9:30 p.m., a routine he had adopted whenever conducting sensitive meetings about the company's government contracts. He believed he was protecting national security information, but he was actually creating the perfect opportunity for someone to commit murder without being recorded. 9:47 p.m. An individual using Blake's own security credentials entered the office through the executive entrance. The person moved directly to Blake's desk, where he was reviewing classified documents on his computer. Blake looked up from his work, but showed no signs of alarm, suggesting he recognized his visitor and felt no immediate threat. The confrontation lasted less than 2 minutes. Blake stood up from his chair and walked around his desk, apparently attempting to escort his visitor out of the office. The killer drew Blake's own .45 caliber handgun from his desk drawer and shot him once in the chest at point-blank range. Blake collapsed immediately, dying within minutes from massive internal bleeding. The killer spent 18 minutes searching Blake's office, accessing his computer files and opening his private safe using a combination that required intimate knowledge of Blake's personal information. Cash, documents, and electronic storage devices were removed from the safe, though the killer left behind the compromising photographs that would later implicate other board members. Security logs showed that Blake's office was accessed again at 10:23 p.m. using Victoria Chun's credentials, though she would later be proven to have been at home during this time. The killer had somehow obtained her access codes and was using them to frame her for Blake's murder while simultaneously positioning her as the next victim. The killer left the building through a service entrance that bypassed the main security checkpoints. They had intimate knowledge of Meridian's security systems and building layout, suggesting this was an inside job planned by someone with extensive access to the company's most sensitive areas. Blake's body was discovered at 6:45 a.m. by his executive assistant Sandra Murphy, who found the office door standing open and Blake lying in a pool of blood behind his desk. She immediately called 911 and then notified the company's board of directors, triggering a crisis management protocol that would ultimately benefit the real killer. Seattle police arrived at 7:02 a.m. and found evidence of a sophisticated burglary designed to look like a corporate espionage operation. The killer had created false evidence suggesting that Blake had been killed by foreign agents seeking to steal Meridian's government contracts, a scenario that would initially mislead investigators. The crime scene revealed signs of a brief struggle, with papers scattered across Blake's desk and his chair overturned. However, the blood spatter patterns indicated Blake had been shot while standing several feet from his desk, contradicting the apparent evidence of a struggle over documents. Victoria Chun was found dead in her Capitol Hill apartment at 8:30 a.m., approximately 90 minutes after Blake's body was discovered. She had been strangled with a silk scarf and positioned to suggest suicide by hanging. A typed suicide note claimed responsibility for Blake's murder and expressed remorse for their affair. The timing of Chun's death immediately raised suspicions among investigators. The killer had needed time to travel from Meridian's headquarters to Chun's apartment, commit a second murder, and stage the suicide scene. The logistics suggested careful planning and intimate knowledge of both victims' schedules and habits. Initial evidence pointed toward a murder-suicide scenario involving the secret lovers, but Detective Maria Santos of the Seattle Police Department's Major Crimes Unit immediately noticed inconsistencies that suggested a more complex conspiracy. The case would require extensive investigation to uncover the truth behind the corporate murders. Detective Maria Santos began her investigation by analyzing Meridian Technologies' corporate structure and identifying individuals with access to both Blake's office and Chun's personal information. Her initial focus centered on the company's executive team and board members, who might have known about the affair and had motives for eliminating both participants. The investigation revealed that Blake had been receiving anonymous threats for 3 months, warning him that his affair with Chun would be exposed unless he agreed to certain business demands. The threats had been delivered through encrypted email accounts that were traced to servers in multiple countries, suggesting sophisticated technological capabilities. Santos discovered that Chun had been conducting her own investigation into corporate espionage at Meridian, having detected unauthorized access to classified government contracts. Her private files contained evidence that someone within the company had been selling sensitive information to foreign competitors, potentially violating national security laws. The detective's analysis of security footage revealed that the killer had used a sophisticated electronic device to bypass Meridian's biometric access controls. The device had been connected to the building's security system for exactly 17 minutes, the same period during which Blake's office cameras had malfunctioned. Santos learned that Blake's .45 caliber handgun had been purchased using company funds and registered as part of Meridian's executive protection program. Only 5 people had knowledge of the weapon's location in Blake's desk drawer: Blake himself, Chun, and 3 members of the executive security team. The investigation uncovered evidence that Chun's apartment had been under surveillance for several weeks before her murder. Neighboring residents reported seeing unmarked vehicles parked across the street and individuals with cameras photographing the building entrance. The surveillance had been professional and systematic. Detective Santos discovered that Blake's private safe had contained $2.3 million in cash that was intended as payment for a corporate acquisition that had been canceled 6 months earlier. The money should have been returned to company accounts, but Blake had kept it for reasons that were initially unclear to investigators. Financial records revealed that Chun had been receiving payments from an offshore account registered to a shell company in the Cayman Islands. The payments totaled $400,000 over 18 months and coincided with her access to classified government contracts. The discovery suggested she might have been involved in corporate espionage. The detective's examination of Blake's computer files revealed that he had been planning to expose the corporate espionage ring that Chun had discovered. His private notes indicated he suspected someone on the board of directors was orchestrating the sale of classified information to foreign competitors. Santos found evidence that Blake had scheduled a meeting with FBI counterintelligence agents for November 13th, 2 days after his murder. He had been preparing to turn over evidence of the espionage operation and seek federal protection for both himself and Chun. The meeting had been arranged through encrypted communications. The investigation revealed that Meridian's stock price had declined by 23% in the 6 months before Blake's murder due to rumors about security breaches and potential government contract cancellations. Several board members had sold large blocks of stock just before the decline, suggesting they had advanced knowledge of the company's problems. Digital forensics analysis of Chun's work computer revealed that she had discovered the identity of the person selling classified information. Her encrypted files contained evidence pointing to Thomas Morrison, Meridian's chief financial officer and a 20-year veteran of the company. Santos learned that Morrison had been facing personal financial difficulties due to his wife's expensive medical treatments and his son's legal problems. He had accumulated over $800,000 in debt and had been desperately seeking ways to generate cash without alerting his colleagues to his financial crisis. The detective discovered that Morrison had been the source of the anonymous threats against Blake, attempting to pressure him into approving fraudulent contracts that would generate illegal commissions. When Blake refused and began investigating the espionage operation, Morrison had decided to eliminate both Blake and Chun to protect himself. The investigation took a shocking turn when Detective Santos discovered that Thomas Morrison had not been working alone. FBI Special Agent David Torres revealed that Morrison was part of a larger conspiracy involving Chinese intelligence agents who had been attempting to steal Meridian's classified cybersecurity technology for over 3 years. The most stunning revelation came when Santos learned that Victoria Chun had not been a victim, but was actually an undercover FBI agent who had been investigating the espionage ring from within Meridian. Her apparent affair with Blake had been part of an elaborate sting operation designed to identify and prosecute the conspirators. FBI files revealed that Chun's real name was Agent Victoria Liu, and she had been working deep cover for 18 months to gather evidence against Morrison and his foreign contacts. Her supposed romantic relationship with Blake was actually a professional partnership, with Blake serving as a willing FBI informant. The investigation uncovered evidence that Blake's $2.3 million in cash was not corporate funds, but FBI money, intended to facilitate a sting operation against the Chinese intelligence network. Blake had been planning to offer the money as payment for classified information, allowing federal agents to identify and arrest the foreign operatives. Santos discovered that Morrison had learned about the FBI investigation through a leak within federal law enforcement. Someone with access to classified information had warned Morrison that he was under surveillance and that Chun was an undercover agent. This revelation had prompted Morrison to accelerate his timeline for eliminating both threats. The most shocking discovery came when investigators found evidence that Morrison's wife, Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, was not suffering from a medical condition, but was actually a Chinese intelligence operative who had been using her husband to gain access to classified information. Her supposed medical treatments were covers for meetings with foreign handlers. Further investigation revealed that the Morrison marriage had been arranged by Chinese intelligence services 8 years earlier, with Elizabeth infiltrating Thomas's life specifically to gain access to Meridian's government contracts. She had been systematically manipulating her husband into committing espionage, while he believed he was simply trying to pay for her medical care. The FBI revealed that Agent Chun's murder had not been committed by Morrison, but by Elizabeth Morrison, who had used her medical knowledge to stage the apparent suicide. Elizabeth had strangled Chun with a paralytic drug before hanging her body, making detection of the murder extremely difficult without extensive forensic analysis. Detective Santos learned that Blake's murder had been committed by Dr. Richard Hoffman, Meridian's chief technology officer, who was also working for Chinese intelligence. Morrison had been set up to take the blame for both murders, while the real killers prepared to escape the country with stolen technology. The investigation uncovered evidence that the entire Meridian board of directors had been infiltrated by foreign agents and their unwitting accomplices. The corporate espionage operation had been far more extensive than initially suspected, with multiple employees compromising national security over several years. The most disturbing revelation came when FBI analysis showed that Meridian's cybersecurity software, used by government agencies worldwide, had been deliberately compromised by the Chinese operatives. The software contained hidden backdoors that allowed foreign intelligence services to access classified information from dozens of countries. Agent Torres revealed that the FBI had been planning a massive counterintelligence operation to roll up the entire spy network when Blake and Chun were murdered. Their deaths had forced federal agents to accelerate their timeline and potentially allowed some conspirators to escape justice. The final shocking discovery was that Morrison himself had been an unwitting pawn in the operation. He had genuinely believed he was committing corporate espionage for financial gain, not realizing that his wife and colleagues were foreign intelligence operatives who were using him to cover their activities. The U.S. Attorney's Office for the Western District of Washington filed federal charges against 7 defendants on December 15, 2024, including murder, espionage, conspiracy to commit acts of terrorism, and violations of the Espionage Act. The charges carried potential death sentences for the murder convictions and life imprisonment for the national security violations. Thomas Morrison was arrested at his Bellevue home and charged with conspiracy to commit espionage and obstruction. of justice. Despite being manipulated by foreign agents, his willing participation in selling classified information made him liable for serious federal crimes. He was denied bail due to flight risk concerns. Dr. Elizabeth Morrison was arrested attempting to board a flight to Beijing at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. She was charged with first-degree murder in Agent Chun's death, espionage, and conspiracy to commit acts of terrorism. Her diplomatic immunity claims were rejected by federal prosecutors. Dr. Richard Hoffman was charged with first-degree murder in Jonathan Blake's death and multiple counts of espionage. He was arrested at his office while attempting to destroy computer equipment containing evidence of the conspiracy. Additional charges were filed related to the compromised cybersecurity software. The federal indictment included 4 other Meridian employees who had been identified as foreign intelligence operatives or willing conspirators. The scope of the infiltration shocked the cybersecurity industry and prompted congressional hearings on corporate security vulnerabilities. The trial began on June 2, 2025, with extensive security measures due to the national security implications of the case. Federal prosecutors characterized the defendants as part of the largest corporate espionage operation in U.S. history, responsible for compromising national security and murdering federal agents. FBI Agent Torres testified about the extensive undercover operation and Agent Chun's heroic work in exposing the spy network. His testimony revealed the sophisticated nature of the Chinese intelligence operation and the years of planning that had gone into infiltrating Meridian Technologies. The prosecution's case included recorded conversations between the defendants and their foreign handlers, financial records showing payments from Chinese intelligence services, and digital evidence of the compromised cybersecurity software. The evidence demonstrated the massive scope of the national security breach. Thomas Morrison's testimony provided crucial evidence about how foreign agents had manipulated him into committing espionage. His cooperation with prosecutors led to a reduced sentence, but also revealed the vulnerability of American executives to foreign intelligence recruitment efforts. Expert witnesses testified about the damage caused by the compromised cybersecurity software, estimating that dozens of countries had been affected and that classified information had been stolen from government agencies worldwide. The testimony established the international scope of the conspiracy. The defense strategies varied among the defendants, with some claiming they were unwitting pawns, while others maintained their innocence despite overwhelming evidence. The foreign intelligence operatives refused to cooperate with authorities and provided no useful information about their operations. After 12 weeks of testimony, the jury returned guilty verdicts against all defendants on all charges. The evidence of murder, espionage, and conspiracy was overwhelming, and the jury clearly understood the serious threat the defendants had posed to national security. Judge Patricia Williams sentenced Elizabeth Morrison and Richard Hoffman to death for the murder charges and life imprisonment for the espionage charges. Thomas Morrison received 40 years in federal prison. The remaining defendants received sentences ranging from 25 years to life in prison. The U.S. Attorney's Office for the Western District of Washington filed federal charges against 7 defendants on December 15, 2024, including murder, espionage, conspiracy to commit acts of terrorism, and violations of the Espionage Act. The charges carried potential death sentences for the murder convictions and life imprisonment for the national security violations. Thomas Morrison was arrested at his Bellevue home and charged with conspiracy to commit espionage and obstruction of justice. Despite being manipulated by foreign agents, his willing participation in selling classified information made him liable for serious federal crimes. He was denied bail due to flight risk concerns. Dr. Elizabeth Morrison was arrested attempting to board a flight to Beijing at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. She was charged with first-degree murder in Agent Chun's death, espionage, and conspiracy to commit acts of terrorism. Her diplomatic immunity claims were rejected by federal prosecutors. Dr. Richard Hoffman was charged with first-degree murder in Jonathan Blake's death and multiple counts of espionage. He was arrested at his office while attempting to destroy computer equipment containing evidence of the conspiracy. Additional charges were filed related to the compromised cybersecurity software. The federal indictment included 4 other Meridian employees who had been identified as foreign intelligence operatives or willing conspirators. The scope of the infiltration shocked the cybersecurity industry and prompted congressional hearings on corporate security vulnerabilities. The trial began on June 2, 2025, with extensive security measures due to the national security implications of the case. Federal prosecutors characterized the defendants as part of the largest corporate espionage operation in U.S. history, responsible for compromising national security and murdering federal agents. FBI Agent Torres testified about the extensive undercover operation and Agent Chun's heroic work in exposing the spy network. His testimony revealed the sophisticated nature of the Chinese intelligence operation and the years of planning that had gone into infiltrating Meridian Technologies. The prosecution's case included recorded conversations between the defendants and their foreign handlers, financial records showing payments from Chinese intelligence services, and digital evidence of the compromised cybersecurity software. The evidence demonstrated the massive scope of the national security breach. Thomas Morrison's testimony provided crucial evidence about how foreign agents had manipulated him into committing espionage. His cooperation with prosecutors led to a reduced sentence, but also revealed the vulnerability of American executives to foreign intelligence recruitment efforts. Expert witnesses testified about the damage caused by the compromised cybersecurity software, estimating that dozens of countries had been affected and that classified information had been stolen from government agencies worldwide. The testimony established the international scope of the conspiracy. The defense strategies varied among the defendants, with some claiming they were unwitting pawns, while others maintained their innocence despite overwhelming evidence. The foreign intelligence operatives refused to cooperate with authorities and provided no useful information about their operations. After 12 weeks of testimony, the jury returned guilty verdicts against all defendants on all charges. The evidence of murder, espionage, and conspiracy was overwhelming, and the jury clearly understood the serious threat the defendants had posed to national security. Judge Patricia Williams sentenced Elizabeth Morrison and Richard Hoffman to death for the murder charges and life imprisonment for the espionage charges. Thomas Morrison received 40 years in federal prison. The remaining defendants received sentences ranging from 25 years to life in prison.